Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Oh yeah, this time.
This is a good one.
We are headed to the Netherlands.
Ooh!
Groningen, to be exact. To this really unique co-housing community called the OudeRKZ.
The OudeRKZ. I love that name.
I know, right? So it used to be a hospital.
Okay.
And now it's been totally transformed into this vibrant living space run by the residents.
Oh, wow. So it's like a co-op situation.
Exactly. They even have their own name. They call themselves Coe voters.
Coe voters.
I like that.
It's very Dutch.
It is.
But here's the thing. Right in the middle of all this community living and self-governance, there's this whole situation brewing.
Oh, what's going on?
That's what we're going to dive into.
Right.
So it involves this guy named Koos, that's pronounced hose with a K.
Okay, Koos, got it.
He's been the longtime treasurer of their maintenance foundation. They call it the OHA.
The OHA. I'm going to try to remember that.
It's fun to say.
Yeah, it is.
But things haven't been so harmonious between Koos and the board of directors lately.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, it's all playing out in their community newsletter.
Oh, really? So it's all very public.
Oh, yeah. It's like a soap opera unfolding in print.
I love it. Okay, so what's the beef between Koos and the board?
Well, it's complicated. But essentially, the board is accusing Koos of some pretty serious stuff, like mismanagement of funds, budget overruns, lack of transparency, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. That's a lot to throw at someone, especially in a community like this where trust is so important.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Koos is firing back with his own accusations.
Oh, so it's a real back and forth.
Oh, yeah. It's getting heated.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's get into the details.
Okay, so let's start with the structure of the OudeRKZ, because it's not just one big co-op.
Okay.
There's the parent cooperative, which is De Kovo.
Right.
But then you have these 3 subsidiary foundations.
Mm-hmm.
The OHA, that's the maintenance one, technical services, and then they even have a bar and discotheque.
Wait, they have their own bar.
They have it all going on.
That's amazing.
Right. So Koos has been the treasurer of the OHA for over 40 years.
40 years? That's
Yeah.
a long time.
Talk about dedication.
Mm.
Right. But now he's at the center of this public spat with the board.
So what exactly are they accusing them of?
Well, one of the biggest things is that they claim there were these huge budget overruns on a renovation project for their B-wing.
How much are we talking about?
At least $120,000 over budget.
Wow. That's not insignificant.
Not at all. Especially for a community relying on shared funds.
Right, so they're basically saying he mishandled the money.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh.
And they're also raising concerns about transparency, saying he hasn't been forthcoming with information and has resisted their attempts to modernize the accounting system.
What kind of modernization are we talking about?
Well, they even tried to implement new accounting software called Snellstart.
Okay, I've heard that one.
But Koos apparently wasn't on board.
Interesting. So it's a clash between old school and new school.
It seems that way. And to really understand the board's perspective, here's a quote directly from their letter in the August 12th issue of the Co-Voter Current.
Okay, lay it on me.
They said, "We have noted that the Maintenance Foundation is not fulfilling its obligation to draw up a proper budget and ensure that decisions taken by the residents' meeting are implemented."
So they're basically saying they want more control over the finances?
Yeah. And they want to make sure everything is being done by the book.
Which makes sense in a way.
Right. They have a responsibility to the whole community.
Exactly.
But, of course, there are 2 sides to every story.
Of course. What does Koos have to say for himself?
Well, he's pushing back hard against all these accusations.
I bet.
He claims that he wasn't even involved in creating the 2024 budget where these overruns happened.
Interesting.
And he feels like the board is twisting facts and taking his statements out of context.
So he's saying it's not his fault.
Exactly. And he's also claiming that he's been trying to step down as treasurer for a while, but the board hasn't handled it well.
Okay, so there's definitely a communication breakdown happening here.
Big time. And Koos even published his own response in the August 27th issue of the Co-Voter Current.
What did he say?
Here's a quote. "I have repeatedly told the general treasurer and the board where they should go for information and have had all documents sent to them."
So he's saying he's been transparent.
Exactly. And he's trying to paint a picture of the board as being unreasonable and difficult.
This is getting juicy.
Oh, yeah. And to add another layer to all of this, Koos has some pretty strong support within the community.
Really?
Yeah. Several residents have come forward to defend him, praising his integrity and his meticulous bookkeeping.
So it's not just Koos versus the board. It's dividing the whole community.
Right, and that's what makes this whole situation so interesting.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions about accountability, transparency, and how you navigate conflict in a self-managed community.
Exactly. And there's also this element of tradition versus change that's playing out.
Oh, how so?
Well, the old RKZ has this big emphasis on Zelfwerkzaamheid, which means self-action.
Okay.
Basically, residents are expected to do a lot of the maintenance tasks themselves. It's part of their whole ethos. But there are new rules being considered that could change that.
Oh, really? How so?
They might start allowing fines if residents don't do their share of the work.
Interesting. So it's like the board is trying to modernize things, but some residents are resisting.
Yeah. And Coos kind of represents that old school way of doing things.
I see. So where do we go from here?
Well, the board has taken over the OHA's duties for now,
Okay.
but the situation is still very much unresolved. There's supposed to be a meeting between Coos and the board, but nobody knows what will come of it.
So it's a real cliffhanger.
It is. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Let's dive deeper into the specifics of this conflict and see if we can figure out what's really going on here.
Let's do it.
Okay, so where should we start unpacking this?
Well, things really came to a head at the residents' meeting on September 25th.
Oh, really?
We actually have the minutes from that meeting.
Ooh, juicy.
It is. Like, you can practically feel the tension in the room.
I bet. So what went down?
Well, the board tried to explain their actions,
Makes sense.
especially their decision to basically take over the OHA's responsibilities.
Right.
But they faced a lot of pushback.
Right.
Residents who were firmly on Coos' side.
Oh, wow. So it was like a divided room.
Pretty much. Several residents spoke up in defense of Coos, highlighting his dedication and his experience.
They must have felt pretty strongly about it.
Oh, yeah. For example, Annette, who'd worked closely with Coos on the OHA, said, "The way I've always experienced Coos, even with the accounting club, Coos always cooperated with changes."
So they're saying he's not resistant to change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that the board isn't giving him enough credit.
Interesting.
And it wasn't just about defending Coos.
Oh, there was more.
Some residents also raised concerns about the board's transparency.
Like they weren't being upfront about things.
Right. And they questioned whether the board had handled the situation fairly.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a concern.
It felt like they might have jumped the gun without fully investigating.
That's not a good look.
Not at all. And another resident, Bob, brought up Coos' reputation for thorough bookkeeping.
I mean, he was the treasurer for 40 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bob said, "What I hear from Annette, I can only agree with. I have worked well with Coos, and he could always account for his bookkeeping. The folders were always there. In his own way, you had to understand it, but you always explained it well."
So they trusted him.
Yeah. It's clear that Coos has a lot of support within the community.
And that this whole situation has really shaken things up.
Definitely. And to make things even more complicated, the residents' meeting also revealed a discrepancy about when Coos resigned.
Oh.
The board claimed he'd resigned in 2020.
But
Coos insisted that he actually resigned in February 2024, specifically because of this conflict with the board.
wow. So there's a lot of conflicting information floating around.
This just adds to the confusion and distrust. And that makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
For sure. So where does this leave the OHA?
Well, that's another big question that came up at the meeting.
I can imagine there are a lot of different opinions on that.
Oh, yeah. The board seems to be leaning towards a more professionalized approach,
Meaning,
maybe even outsourcing some of the tasks to a property management company.
okay.
But some residents are pushing back against that.
Why?
They argue that the community should stay true to the principles of Zelfwerkzaamheid.
That self-action thing.
Right. They worry that bringing in outside help would change the character of the community.
Yeah, I could see their point.
It's like this whole situation with Coos has brought this underlying tension between tradition and change to the surface.
Makes sense. So they're at a crossroads trying to figure out how to move forward.
Exactly. And how to balance their unique community spirit with the need for maybe more modern management practices.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Definitely. And it's a situation that a lot of communities are facing these days.
Yeah, how to adapt to changing times without losing what makes you special.
Right. And in the case of the old RKZ, it seems like that balance has been disrupted.
This is a good one. I'm really curious to see how it all unfolds.
Me too. It'll be interesting to see if they can find a way to bridge that gap between tradition and change.
Agreed. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next.
Right. Like, where do they go from here?
Yeah.
Well, as of like the last issue of the OudeRKZ, things are still totally up in the air.
Really? No resolution yet.
Nope. Coos agreed to meet with the board.
Okay.
But, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to see eye to eye or find some kind of common ground.
True. It's a tough situation for sure.
And it's going to be a real test for their whole community.
How so?
Like, they need to figure out how to address the board's concerns.
About the finances and stuff?
Exactly. But they also need to do it in a way that respects Coos and everything he's done for the community.
Yeah. You can't just discount 40 years of service.
Right. So it's a delicate balancing act.
And whatever happens, it's going to have a big impact on the future of the community.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
this whole situation really makes you think about the importance of communication.
Yeah.
Like clear communication.
Mm.
It seems like a lot of this drama could have been avoided if everyone had just been more upfront and open with each other from the start.
Totally. And it's not just about this one community. It's a lesson for all of us.
Like in any group or organization,
Yeah.
having clear channels for communication and making sure everyone's on the same page can prevent these kinds of conflicts from blowing up.
100%.
But it's also about building a culture of respect.
Where people feel comfortable speaking their minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where different perspectives are actually valued.
It's about finding that sweet spot between individual needs and the needs of the group as a whole.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
And recognizing that even though conflict is uncomfortable, it can actually be a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. It
Yeah.
can push us to grow and to do things differently.
Right. It can lead to positive change.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm really curious to see how the old RKZ navigates this whole thing.
Me too.
Uh-huh.
Like, can they actually bridge that gap between tradition and change?
And can they come out of this even stronger as a community?
Those are the big questions. And honestly, it's something that a lot of communities are wrestling with these days.
For sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Coos case, here's something for you all to ponder.
Ooh, lay it on us.
Think about the communities you're a part of,
Okay.
your workplaces, your friend groups, your family.
Got it.
How can you promote open communication in those spaces?
Good question.
How can you foster more collaboration and build trust, even when there are disagreements?
Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right?
It's what makes or breaks a community. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the drama unfolding at the old RKZ. We'll keep you updated if there are any major developments. And until next time, keep those critical thinking gears turning.